Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Kris. This is part 2. This video's been awesome. This is the most dangerous building in Manhattan. I've already clicked that. If you could do that for me, it helps out tremendously. You can click on the thanks button, donate to the channel. You don't have to. If you do, you request a video, your name sponsors the video. It's my way of saying thank you. Let's get into part 2. It was a big cliffhanger. I'm going to go back a little bit.
75% of the gravity load, the tension in the beam is now 380 tons. So they really needed 14 bolts, but they used only 4.
This thing is in real trouble.
Imagine, what Bill LeMessurier was thinking at that moment. You see that number and you're like, oh my God, this is serious. It's really serious.
LeMessurier was starting to panic. He didn't want to rush to conclusions, so he flew to Canada to check his calculations with Alan Davenport at the Boundary Layer wind tunnel. After running more tests, they found that it was even worse than LeMessurier thought. The estimated 40% increase in stress was technically correct, but LeMessurier made his calculations assuming the building wasn't moving. This is called static conditions. But the wind tunnel gave LeMessurier a dynamic analysis, how the forces change when the building is moving around. To LeMessurier's horror, the wind tunnel analysis showed that the stresses could increase up to 60% more than originally anticipated. LeMessurier squirreled himself away in Maine and worked through the data from the wind tunnel again, joint by joint on every floor. The weakest joints were at the building's 30th floor. If those failed, the entire building would fall. But what were the chances that a storm strong enough to topple the building would pass through New York City? LeMessurier dug through the historical weather reports. On average, a storm strong enough to tear the building apart occurred every 67 years, but only if the tuned mass damper was working. If a storm knocked out power, then even 110 km/h winds blowing for just 5 minutes would collapse the building. In any given year, the chance of a storm that size happening was 1 in 16. Just 1 year before Citicorp was completed, wind gusts of 110 km/h roared through New York City as Hurricane Belle passed through. What do you think this moment was like for LeMessurier when he ran these calculations?
It must have been devastating. It just must have been, I can't imagine the fear. I can't imagine the feelings. It just must have been truly a moment he never thought he would live through.
That storm was going to fall down in my lifetime. And since this was July, it could fall down the summer of 1978.
LeMessurier needed to decide and decide fast, but revealing this mistake could mean lawsuits, bankruptcy, and professional ruin. He could stay silent, only Davenport knew and he wouldn't reveal anything, or he could entirely disappear. In a later interview, he admitted, "I did say to myself, I could drive down the main turnpike at 100 miles an hour and deliberately drive into a bridge abutment. That would be the end, and all of this would go away. I thought about that."
No, it doesn't go away. You go away. But the rest of the people still have to deal with this, and then when it does happen, and they start evaluating things, they start looking at the steel and everything after it's fallen, and they realize, oh, there was a real bad flaw. Then people are going to start coming out of the woodworks. Yeah, I talked to him about it. He knew. Oh, we put 4 bolts in here. It was enough. And then, then it's worse. Then everything you've done will get looked through.
But there was a 1 in 16 chance of collapse that very fall. With thousands of lives at risk, there was never any other choice but to act. After speaking to a few lawyers and other engineering experts, LeMessurier told the architect Stubbins, and together they informed Citicorp's chairman, Walter Wriston. Within hours of that meeting, LeMessurier acquired emergency generators for the tuned mass damper. The TMD was originally designed to stabilize any swaying for comfort, but now it became the crutch that the tower leaned on. LeMessurier pinned all his hopes on it. He called the confidential repair plan Project Pandora, but that sounded ominous, so he came up with the Special Engineering Review of Events Nobody Envisioned, or Project Serene for short. Each night, welders would enter the building after everyone left, rip off the sheetrock around the chevron beams, and then weld two 5-centimeter thick, 2-meter long steel plates on each joint.
Like Band-Aids, literally Band-Aids on both sides of these joints.
After, they'd replace the wall and clean everything up before the office workers came back the next morning. They needed to weld over 200 joints, and Lemessurier ranked them by importance, starting with the ones on the 30th floor. But the repairs wouldn't be completed before hurricane season, so Citicorp worked with the Red Cross to develop a 10-block evacuation plan.
Like, how many people were at risk in the building, and if it fell, would it affect other buildings? Like, were there chances of it leading to something more disastrous?
Absolutely. This would have toppled, and it would have toppled into another building, which would have toppled into another building, which would have continued a horrific process. So it was untold what the ultimate effects could have been.
I mean, like, just the evacuation plans were how many people?
Thousands. The building itself housed thousands. And then the residents and the businesses surrounding the building, it was into the thousands.
Despite the risk, they decided not to tell the public, or even the office workers in the building. No one wanted a mass panic.
See, and I think that's kind of garbage, because you're saying that their life isn't important, and if something like this happens, they have every right to not want to be in an unsafe building. And when stuff like this happens, no, I think you should be held accountable if you're going to do this. Be open and honest with them. It's their choice on that. But by doing this and something happens, well, we chose not to notify them. Do you think the people would have wanted that? No. You think their families would have been happy with that? Absolutely not. You got to notify them. I don't care if it's looked at as, well, you know, it's safer. We don't want to panic. I don't care. Should have been right the first time. And now you didn't do it, so now you owe the people who were in that building.
Instead, they fitted strain gauges on important structural members. The gauges monitored the skyscraper's every bend and twist from a comm center 8 blocks away. At least that would give them a little bit of warning. But this plan required new telephone lines, and the phone company wouldn't get around to doing this for months. So Citicorp's chairman immediately called AT&T's president, and the lines were installed the next morning.
Now, you might not be able to install emergency telephone lines at a whim, but you can still stay connected no matter what.
Henry?
We travel to connect SIM cards, stuff to stay down, just an important thing. Sponsoring this.
I mean, you should probably take this.
But even though Lemessurier tried to keep Project Serene under wraps, people started asking questions. On August 8th, Citicorp released a statement about the repairs.
No, we had to cook up a line of bull, I'll tell you. And white lies at this point are entirely moral. You don't want to spread terror in the community to people that don't need to be terrorized. We were terrorized, no question about that.
Several newspapers reported on it.
Again, you don't have the right to play with someone's life if something happens. They have every right to decide if they want to be in that building at that time. So, yeah, it's not a little white lie. It's bullshit. Now I'm annoyed.
But they didn't have the details. Then, Lemessurier got a message. The New York Times was trying to reach him. If he didn't respond, they would know something was up.
So I mixed a martini for myself, and it's 1 minute past 6. I dialed the New York Times. I pick it up, the phone. They pick up the phone. It's a tape recorder saying, the New York Times has gone on strike as of 6 o'clock. Not only did the New York Times go on strike, but all the newspapers in New York went on strike until October. So we had a press blackout, and that was the greatest thing that ever happened.
The press was off their back, and the weather was beautiful. The repair work continued smoothly. But late August brought the news everyone had been dreading.
Hurricane Ella starts brewing in the Caribbean. And this is the one storm that they're nervous about.
The repairs were halfway done by now.
I think it was a 1 in 200 year storm that it could withstand, but Lemessurier wasn't taking chances because he didn't know the intensity of the storm, and this was a strong storm.
So there was a chance.
There was absolutely a chance, and they had to prepare for that chance.
By Friday, September 1st, Ella was making her way toward New York with winds reaching 200 kilometers per hour. City officials braced to start the evacuation. Police would go door to door to get everyone out within a 10-block radius. For 24 tense hours, Ella stalled around North Carolina.
Like LeMessurier said, we were sweating blood.
But sometime in the night, Hurricane Ella veered off into the sea at the last minute. It intensified and hit Canada with peak winds of 225 kilometers per hour. But Citicorp was safe. LeMessurier described that next morning in New York as the most beautiful day that the world's ever seen. They completed the repairs in October, just 6 weeks after LeMessurier told Citicorp.
Now, the building, according to LeMessurier, can withstand a 1 in 1,000 storm.
The repairs cost between $4 and $5 million, but LeMessurier argued that Citicorp approved an earlier building design that cost $5 to $6 million more, so they were willing to spend that much on the skyscraper anyway. And for almost 2 decades, the secret was confined to a small inner circle. But in 1995, the New Yorker finally brought Project Serene into the light. Far from being vilified, LeMessurier was praised for owning up to his mistake and fixing the issue as soon as possible. After the article, New York updated the building code to require quartering wind calculations. And since that first damper in Citicorp, TMDs have spread across the globe, allowing architects to push skyscrapers taller and slimmer.
It's the first tall building in the world ever built with mechanical help to make the structure work. That's remarkable. Incidentally, that has been now copied 100 times in Japan. This is ubiquitous, and when I go to Japan, I'm treated like a tin god because I'm the father of the tuned mass damper. I said, really?
Of the 20 tallest buildings in the world, 6 include a tuned mass damper, and they're especially critical in typhoon or earthquake-prone regions. For example, Taipei 101 has a massive 660-ton pendulum that stabilizes the building. It can withstand up to 200 km/h winds and earthquakes with magnitudes over 6.8. But the legacy of this building is still steeped in controversy. First, who was the mysterious student that started it all?
I think it was spring of 1978. There's a student at Princeton, an undergraduate student by the name of Diane Hartley, and she's studying structural engineering. It was time for her to consider a senior thesis, and they decided that a study of the new Citicorp Tower would be wonderful.
It's a remarkable thesis. It contains a lot of the original engineering calculations by the engineers.
She's looking through the documentation, where did they consider quartering winds? And she's not seeing it. And I must be wrong, she says. She's just an undergraduate student, and you guys are award-winning structural engineers. The engineer explains to Diane Hartley, quartering winds are not a factor in this building. So she's satisfied. She graduates, that's it. Doesn't think about it again.
But a year after the New Yorker article, the BBC released a documentary on the crisis.
And so she was holding her baby, and she turned on the television, and lo and behold, she heard them reference a conversation with a student, an engineering student from New Jersey, reaching out to LeMessurier. And she said, I almost dropped my baby. And then so she just assumed, for years afterwards, she assumed that it wasn't me, because I didn't speak to LeMessurier.
But then in 2003, her thesis advisor told Diane that he checked all the other New Jersey engineering and architecture programs, and no one else was working on a project about Citicorp in 1978. She was the only one.
She never spoke to LeMessurier personally. She never claimed to speak to LeMessurier personally. The assumption was that either LeMessurier was mistaken and that it was Diane Hartley who made the call, it was a female, or more likely that LeMessurier was basically tipped off by his New York engineers.
Then, in 2011, a man named Lee DeCarolis came forward.
And the phone call, as we understand it, came from a student at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. His name is Lee DeCarolis.
He's not asking for money. He's not asking for fame or glory. He's just saying, this is interesting, and I'm the guy who made this call. And he said, yeah, I had a conversation with Bill LeMessurier, and he pretty much lined up with what LeMessurier himself said.
Sadly, LeMessurier passed away in 2007 before he could confirm the student's identity.
believe it or not, 40 years later, I learned a lot of raw feeling still on this. People aren't anxious to talk about this, especially people that were involved in it, even people that weren't involved in it, but were tangentially involved in it.
We reached out to LeMessurier Associates, and they refused to respond to our request.
You think that they would, the namesake for their company stood up and did the right thing, but I don't think they want to be associated with mistakes.
Their project description for Citicorp doesn't even mention the repairs. The building was sold to Boston Properties in 2001, who renamed it 601 Lexington. They also didn't respond to our request for comment and refused to let us film inside the building.
Further questions arose in 2021 with a new study from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They wanted to see if quartering winds were more demanding for a building like Citicorp.
Although they did conclude that the pressure from perpendicular winds was greater, their analysis didn't include any internal structure specific to Citicorp.
As for LeMessurier, the engineering field still regards his actions as upstanding, and the Citicorp case is taught all over the world as a case of good engineering ethics. In fact, in my own engineering ethics course, I learned about the Citicorp building.
And every structural engineer experiences this. When you actually feel the weight of the responsibility, you're saying, based on my engineering, that building is going to stand up. Nobody else worries about it. And so if you think about the emotional pressure that Bill LeMessurier was under, and then needing to come back and do something about it and to mobilize and to hold that during this entire process, it's truly a remarkable story. I mean, I can't imagine it. I can't imagine it.
I said, look, if you got a license from the state and a certification to University First, and now you're going to use that license to hold yourself out as a professional, you have a responsibility beyond yourself. If you see something that is a social risk, good heavens, this thing would kill thousands. You must do something. You must do something.
That's very cool. I disagree with them not notifying people, but I understand why. But yeah, if something happens, I die in a building that you knew was structurally unsound or needed to be fixed or whatever, no. I only get one go around, and I'm trusting you, and you know something, and you're going to play a game with my life? No. All right, that was interesting, though, and I'm glad he fixed it. So I'm going to end it here. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.